You didn't sign up for an easy path. You signed up for the early alarms. Long miles, quiet roads, and the kind of discomfort most people spend their lives avoiding. You choose something that demands more, not just your legs, but from your discipline, your patience, and your honesty to yourself. So let's be honest about something that can quietly sabotage all of that. Undereating is not toughness. It might feel like control. It might feel like you're getting lighter, faster, more efficient. But what you're really doing is asking your body to build strength without materials, to adapt without fuel, to endure without support. And your body will try. For a while. It always does. It will stretch what you give it. It will compensate. It will carry you through miles on fumes because that's what it's built to do. But eventually, the cost shows up. It shows up in the workout that falls apart halfway through. In the long run, that feels harder than it should. In fatigue, that sleep doesn't fix. In the injury that came out of nowhere. That's not weakness. That's a system running on empty. Ultra running is not about seeing how little you can survive on. It's about seeing how well you can support the effort. Think about what you're asking your body to do. Hours on your feet. Repeats impact. Climbing, descending, stabilizing, adapting, day after day, week after week. That is not starvation sport. That is a fueling sport. Food is not the enemy of performance. It's the foundation of it. Every calorie is information. Every meal is a signal that says build, repair, adapt, get stronger. When you undereat, the signals change. Protect, slow down, survive. You don't train to survive. You train to perform. The longest ultra runners aren't the ones who eat the least. They're the ones who respect the work through to fuel properly. They understand that discipline isn't just about pushing harder. It's about supporting harder. It's about doing the unglamorous things consistently. Eating enough, recovering well, listening when something feels off. Because real toughness isn't ignoring your body. Real toughness is taking care of it so it can take you further. So here's the challenge. Fuel like your training matters because it does. Fuel like your goals are real because they are. Fuel like your body is your most important piece of equipment because it is. You are not here to prove how little you need. You are not here to discover how much you're capable of. And that requires energy. Give your body what it needs, and it will meet you on the trail with strength you didn't know you had. Starvation, starve it, and it will eventually force you to stop. This sport is already hard enough. Don't make it harder by fighting your own physiology. Run far, run strong, and don't forget to eat like an athlete who intends to finish what they started. Welcome in. I'm your host and coach, Josh. Thanks for tuning in today. Today we're going to talk about undereating and some signs to look out for. We're also going to talk about gut training and some things to reset the gut in the race. If something was to happen, maybe these steps can help you out. And although I'm a coach, I'm not perfect either when it comes to fueling. So definitely this is going to help me too. So Just because I'm a coach doesn't mean I have everything put together or anything like that. So I definitely struggle with under eating for sure. Not so much the food aspect, but with protein. I definitely need to eat more protein. And definitely when I cut out dairy, that's like 40 grams of protein that I would be having. So I just got to get better focused on that. If I cut out the cottage cheese and the what is it, Greek yogurt, you're looking at about 40 grams. There's a lot of protein in dairy, but I'll probably have to do some whey protein because I kind of fell on eating 150 grams of protein, which is a lot. But that's probably what's recommended for my body. Or I probably need to eat even more than that, So, because I weigh 150, so I probably should be eating at least 150, if not more, of protein. And sometimes I find that really hard to actually eat in whole foods. So I'll probably have to get an ultra processed protein shake, just whey protein. And it looks like one serving's just 25 grams. But that will definitely help, I think, for sure. And it's kind of off season. So, but maybe the next, I guess, 100-miler that I run, I'll probably definitely try to eat more protein with all the knowledge that I've learned about protein for recovering and for fueling. So definitely you don't want a lot of protein when you're running an ultra. You probably want more carbs and fat. But I'm saying during the training purposes of just recovering after you work out, you want to take in that protein. And one thing to remember with the protein, your body can only absorb probably anywhere from 20 to 40 grams per session, which I know that window is pretty wide open. I guess you could assume maybe that your body does 30. Meet in the middle of that statistic there. So let's say you can absorb 30 grams of protein, and you're going to want to do that every 3 to 4 hours throughout the day. So you definitely want to be eating maybe 3 to 4 meals a day during training to get the protein, which I know that's a lot. But if you do that, you'll be able to maintain your strength and recover better. So, with that being said, it is tough, I think, to get that much protein throughout a whole day. Eating whole foods, definitely a struggle with that. But yeah, I'll try the I hate to do it myself to use an ultra processed protein shake, but it seems like the only option I have, at least, unless I eat more chicken, I guess. One of the shrimp, like 5 large shrimp are like 30 grams of protein with like no fat. So that is pretty awesome. But unfortunately for me, I can't eat shrimp. For some reason, that stuff just makes it where I can't breathe. So, but if you're not allergic to shrimp or anything, that's a really good option. Just be careful with shrimp because it has it's low in mercury, which is good, but you still need to be concerned about mercury. And then it just has a lot of cholesterol, which is not really good or could be bad for the heart. I know they kind of go back and forth on that cholesterol thing. But anyways, for me, I can't do it because it really knocks me out if I eat shrimp. So, which is strange because if I eat it and I don't run, I would never even know that I had some kind of allergic reaction to it. So, anyways, yeah. So they'll talk. I think we'll talk a lot about protein. Protein's really good for you. So, yeah, it's definitely hard to get enough protein. I struggle too. If you struggle, I feel the pain. It is a little bit hard, but maybe incorporating a protein shake can help get the necessary protein that you require within the day. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. I know that there's so much out there with podcasts to listen on and audio books you could listen to. So I appreciate you guys tuning in and spending time with me here today. And hopefully this information can help your journey on finishing the race and finishing the race healthy and wanting to do it again. So yeah, if you are struggling with under eating, I feel the pain. It's really easy to happen, especially if you're new in the sport. You're probably not used to eating so much, maybe, or if you're trying to lose weight. But I'll do an episode on weight loss another time. This is just under eating episode, I guess. So, okay.
Let's say you're right in the middle of training for your very first ultra marathon. You've got the fancy hydration vest, the aggressive trail shoes, the downloaded training plan taped to your fridge.
Right, the whole setup.
Yeah, exactly. Or on the flip side, maybe you're a seasoned trail runner.
Yeah.
But lately you're just feeling inexplicably flat. Like your hands are always cold, even when you're sitting indoors. You are completely exhausted despite putting in the miles. And your race times are, well, they're stagnating or even slipping backwards.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
Oh, it's the worst. And naturally, because endurance athletes are just wired this way, you might think you just need to push harder, grind it out, dig deeper. But what if, and this is the big what if, your body is literally shutting down non-essential internal systems just to survive your training?
It's a terrifying reality. And it's incredibly common in endurance sports, actually. We have this tendency to think of the human body as a machine, like a car, where you just pour gas in, hit the accelerator, and it just has to perform.
Right, just fuel up and go.
Exactly. But your body is actually this highly intelligent evolutionary survival organism. When you push it to extreme physical limits without giving it the exact chemical resources it needs, it doesn't just keep humming along until it runs out of gas. It initiates a systematic, highly prioritized shutdown of your biology.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. The mission of this deep dive is to really explore this massive hidden epidemic in the ultra endurance world. It's called Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport, or REDs.
Yeah, REDs is the big one.
And we have a massive stack of sources on the table today. We're looking at the 2023 International Olympic Committee consensus statement. We've got clinical metabolic studies tracking 230-kilometer ultra runners, and just a ton of deep physiological analysis.
And it's a lot of data.
It is. So we're going to break down the true physiological cost of undereating, the vital and honestly notoriously ignored role of protein, and how you, whether you're just starting out or you're an elite aiming for a podium, can build an evidence-based fueling strategy.
Yeah.
One that protects both your performance and your long-term health.
And, the framework we are looking at today is so important because for a very long time, the sports science community viewed underfueling as this sort of niche issue.
Like it only affected a small group.
Right, exactly. It was primarily focused on female athletes through what was known as the female athlete triad. But the 2023 IOC consensus just completely shattered that limited paradigm. We now understand with hard clinical data that this affects absolutely everyone.
Men, women, elites, amateurs.
Everyone, young, old. It is a multi-system syndrome that literally destroys your body from the inside out if you don't catch it early.
I like to frame this whole concept of fueling, especially for beginners who might get overwhelmed by basic nutrition terms like a household financial budget.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, so imagine you have your total daily income, which is the food, the calories you eat on a given Tuesday. But then you have to pay the massive, unavoidable tax of a 4-hour trail run in the mountains.
That's a hefty tax.
Huge. So the question isn't just how much money you made today. The really critical question is, what is actually left in the bank account to keep the lights on, the water running, and the roof repaired in your buddy's house after that exercise tax man takes his cut?
That budget concept is honestly the perfect way to visualize what scientists call energy availability, or EA. And EA is the absolute core metric we have to understand before we can talk about anything else.
So how do we actually calculate that? For a new runner, how do they figure out their EA?
Well, energy availability is your dietary energy intake, so the calories you eat minus the energy expended during exercise. But here is the crucial biochemical part that most people miss. You don't just look at that leftover number. You have to divide that remaining energy by your fat-free mass.
Let's pause right there because I want to make sure we are crystal clear on the math. Why do we care about fat-free mass specifically? I mean, when I step on a bathroom scale, it just gives me my total body weight. Why is the scientific community ignoring fat and only looking at the fat-free tissue when calculating if we are starving?
It comes down to how your tissues actually burn energy. Think about the tissues in your body. Fat-free mass is your metabolically active tissue. We are talking about your skeletal muscles, your brain, your heart, your liver, your bones.
Stuff that's doing the work.
Exactly. These are the tissues that are constantly, relentlessly demanding energy just to keep you alive. They need calories to sustain cellular repair, to maintain your core body temperature, to, mount an immune response.
And fat doesn't do that.
No. Fat tissue is conversely just an energy storage depot. It basically just sits there holding potential energy. It doesn't demand massive daily caloric upkeep to maintain itself. So when clinical researchers calculate energy availability, they want to know precisely how many calories are available to keep those vital, active, demanding tissues functioning properly.
Okay, so we take the calories we ate, subtract the calories we burned on our run, and divide that leftover number by our fat-free mass in kilograms.
Yeah.
What is the magic number we are looking for here? Like, how much money needs to be left in the bank per kilogram of muscle and bone to keep the house running?
Decades of clinical research have established that optimal energy availability is 45 kilocalories per kilogram of fat-free mass per day.
45, okay.
Right. If you hit that target, your body is in a state of full physiological support. It feels safe. It can adapt to the stress of your training, synthesize new muscle tissue, keep your endocrine system balanced, and maintain bone density.
And what's the danger zone?
The danger zone, what the literature calls problematic low energy availability, or LEA, happens when that number drops below 30 for women and generally around 25 for men. And the scary part is, it only takes about 5 consecutive days in that zone to trigger systemic disruption.
Wait, 5 days?
Yep.
Let that sink in. 5 days is literally just a Tuesday to a Saturday.
Yeah.
You could hit that danger zone simply by having a really heavy training week, maybe doing a couple of back-to-back long runs on the weekend, and just forgetting to increase your portion sizes at dinner.
It happens all the time. Unintentional underfueling is rampant.
And in ultra running, the expenditure math gets genuinely terrifying. I was looking at the clinical data in our sources. Runners can burn anywhere from 13,000 to over 70,750 calories in a single 24-hour race event.
Which is almost impossible to comprehend.
Right. And one specific study of runners tackling a 230-kilometer race showed them hitting an 18,364 calorie deficit by the time they crossed the finish line.
The deficit is staggering. And what's wild is that during these massive efforts, ultra runners on average only manage to consume 36 to 53% of what they actually need. You are bleeding energy, and your intake is just a tiny trickle.
Now, hold on, because this raises a huge pushback. It's something I hear all the time from amateur runners who are just getting into the sport. If someone is running 50 miles a week, doing these massive weekend mountain runs, and they're living in this huge caloric deficit, shouldn't they just be losing a ton of weight?
You would think so, logically.
Yeah, I mean, I see runners on the trail who are clearly underfueling. They look totally exhausted, but their weight on the scale hasn't changed in 6 months. Why is weight alone a terrible metric for figuring out if you are starving your engine?
That is the ultimate illusion of endurance sports, and why weight is a terrible indicator. To understand why you aren't losing weight, you have to look at human evolutionary biology. The human body is magnificently engineered to survive famine.
Okay, famine survival mode.
Right. So if you were a hunter-gatherer and a famine hit, and you had to walk 20 miles a day to find food while starving, your body wouldn't just keep burning calories at a normal rate until you died. When your energy availability drops below that 30 kilocalorie threshold, the brain panics. It senses an existential threat.
It thinks you're dying.
Exactly. It realizes that if it continues to operate at its normal metabolic rate, you will starve to death. So it establishes what we call a new energy balance steady state.
I think I see where this is going. It's slowing everything down to match the new lower income. It's like realizing you lost your job, so you instantly cancel all your streaming subscriptions, you stop going out to eat, and you turn the heat down to 50 degrees to stretch what's left in the bank.
That is exactly what happens. Your body dramatically lowers your resting metabolic rate. And to achieve that lower rate, it stops spending energy on anything it views as a biological luxury.
What counts as a luxury to the body?
Well, in a survival scenario, building thick, dense bones is a luxury. Reproductive function and fertility are luxuries. Growing hair, repairing microscopic tears in your calf muscles, mounting a robust immune response against a minor, cold-all, absolute luxuries. The brain just unplugs them to conserve power.
Wow.
Yeah. So you stop losing weight on the bathroom scale because your body has successfully, tragically matched its daily resting expenditure to your newly starved caloric intake. You aren't losing weight, but internally, your cellular health is in a total freefall.
That paints an incredibly grim picture. It's literally a sinking ship.
Yeah.
You're the captain, and water's pouring into the hull, so you start throwing the heavy, less critical cargo overboard just to keep the vessel afloat. You throw away your reproductive health, you toss your bone density overboard, you sacrifice your immune system, all just so your heart and lungs have enough energy to keep you jogging down the trail.
It is a dark analogy, but physiologically it's entirely accurate. And what is most alarming is that this internal shutdown doesn't happen silently in the dark. There are massive blaring alarms going off in the body. But endurance culture is insidious. Athletes are almost conditioned to ignore these alarms, or worse, to view them as badges of honor.
Like signs that they are working hard and being disciplined.
Exactly.
Let's start looking at those alarms. The sources we're diving into detail, the 10 most severe physiological and psychological consequences of chronic undereating and training. I don't want to just list these off like a textbook. I want to really understand the mechanisms of this RED's systemic failure. So, problem number 1. If my body is shutting down the non-essentials to survive, what is the very first system to get its funding cut?
The master switch for this entire shutdown is your endocrine system, specifically the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. When your brain registers low energy availability, it sends a signal to downregulate thyroid production. The most noticeable drop is in your active thyroid hormone known as T3.
And what does T3 do?
T3 is essentially the master thermostat for your resting metabolic rate. When T3 plummets, your metabolism literally grinds to a halt to save energy.
Which perfectly explains that classic ultra runner symptom of being freezing cold in a 70-degree room. If the thyroid turns down the thermostat to save the energy that would normally generate body heat, you're going to be shivering in July.
Exactly.
But wait, if my metabolism slows down and I'm still forcing my body to run 20 miles, where is it getting the fuel? If I'm not eating enough carbs or fat, what is it burning? This leads us to problem number 2.
It burns you. It burns your own tissue. This is muscle catabolism. While your thyroid axis is slowing down, another system, your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis, kicks into absolute overdrive. This is your body's stress response system.
Because running while starving is a huge stress.
Right. Because you are subjecting yourself to massive physical stress, the HPA axis floods your system with cortisol.
It's a stress hormone.
Yeah, but cortisol isn't just about feeling stressed mentally, it's a catabolic hormone. Catabolic means it breaks things down. A high cortisol, low T3 environment is profoundly destructive. Instead of your body taking nutrients from your diet to synthesize and build muscle after a grueling trail run, the high cortisol levels signal your body to literally break down your existing healthy muscle tissue to harvest amino acids for fuel.
That is wild. So you are running 50 miles a week with the goal of getting stronger, but biochemically, you are cannibalizing the very engine you were trying to build.
You're eating your own muscles to survive.
Which brings us to problem number 3, and this one scares me the most. Bone mineral density loss. Does that catabolic breakdown happen to our bones too? Because I hear so much about stress fractures in runners, but I always assumed that was just from the physical pounding of the pavement.
The physical pounding is the trigger, but the starvation is what makes the bone actually snap. It comes down to cellular architecture. Most people think of bones as dead, static scaffolding, right? Like the steel beams in the skyscraper.
Yeah, just rigid sticks inside us.
But bone is living, highly dynamic tissue. It is constantly being broken down and rebuilt in a process called remodeling. You have cells called osteoclasts, which act like a demolition crew, clearing away old micro-damaged bone. And you have cells called osteoblasts, which act like the construction crew, coming in right behind them to lay down fresh, strong, new bone matrix.
Okay, so I've got a demo crew and a build crew working in tandem.
Normally, yes. This delicate balance is tightly regulated by hormones, particularly estrogen and testosterone. But in a state of energy deficiency, which brings us to problem 4, hormonal shutdown, those reproductive hormones drop off a cliff. When that happens, the bone remodeling process uncouples.
So the foreman sends the construction crew home because there's no money in the budget to buy new materials, but the demolition crew just keeps showing up to work.
That is exactly what happens. The osteoclasts keep absorbing bone, but the osteoblasts stop building. The demolition outpaces the construction. The result is a rapid, terrifying loss of bone mineral density. Your bones become porous and brittle. And when you subject porous bones to the eccentric load of downhill trail running, you get severe stress fractures.
That's horrifying.
And if this happens during your late teens or 20s, which is the crucial window for building peak bone mass, you can induce early onset osteoporosis that is incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible, to fully reverse.
Let's stick with problem 4 for a second, the hormonal shutdown. Because when the body goes into survival mode, reproductive health seems to be a major casualty. How does this actually manifest for a female athlete versus a male athlete?
For females, the clinical term is functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, or FHA. The hypothalamus in the brain senses the starvation and realizes that a pregnancy in this environment would be fatal to the mother. So it completely shuts down the signaling to the ovaries, the menstrual cycle stops, estrogen plummets.
And as you just said, estrogen is essential for bone health.
Yes, and it's also cardioprotective and neuroprotective. Now for the guys, it's more insidious, but just as devastating. We call it exercise hypogonadal male condition, or EHMC. Because there's no single dramatic event like losing a period, men often ignore the gradual decline.
So the male reproductive system just shuts down silently.
Basically, yes. The testosterone drop is severe. We have clinical studies looking at elite, highly trained male endurance athletes who are operating in chronic energy deficits. Their blood work shows testosterone levels that are sometimes 45% lower than their completely sedentary, non-exercising peers.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me that a guy running 70 miles a week who looks like the peak of human fitness could have half the testosterone of a guy who just plays video games on the couch all day?
Absolutely. The couch potato has plenty of energy available to synthesize hormones. The runner is starving. This leads to a massive loss of libido, mood disturbances, and crucially for their sport, a massive drop in power output. They lose their explosive speed and their ability to climb hills because testosterone is critical for muscle contraction.
That is a staggering statistic. All right, moving to problem number 5, cardiovascular maladaptation. This is where I think endurance culture gets truly dangerous. In running, we celebrate the athlete's heart. If I go to the doctor and my resting heart rate is 45 beats per minute, the doctor usually gives me a high five. But the sources are saying that in REDs, a low heart rate is actually a symptom of systemic failure. How is that possible?
We have to make a very clear distinction between a healthy low heart rate and a pathological low heart rate. A healthy athlete's heart has a low resting heart rate because of something called eccentric hypertrophy. Through proper training and proper fueling, the chamber of the heart has grown larger and stronger. It pumps a massive volume of blood with every single beat, so it doesn't need to beat as often.
Okay, that's the good version. What's the REDs version?
The REDs version is extreme bradycardia caused by myocardial atrophy.
Atrophy, meaning shrinking?
Yes. Because the body is starving, the heart muscle itself is literally shrinking and degrading. It is cannibalizing its own cardiac tissue. Furthermore, your autonomic nervous system steps in and artificially suppresses the heart rate to conserve every last drop of energy. So in REDs, your heart isn't beating 40 times a minute because it is incredibly strong and efficient. It is beating 40 times a minute because it is physically exhausted, wasting away, and your brain is forcing it to slow down to prevent you from starving.
So it's beating slowly because it's dying, not because it's fit. That is genuinely chilling, and it ties directly into problem number 6, hematological impairment, which is what happens to our blood. Ultra runners are famous for dealing with anemia, but the mechanism here blew my mind. The sport itself physically destroys our blood cells.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon known as foot strike hemolysis. Imagine running 50 miles on rocky trails. Every single time your foot slams into the ground, the mechanical impact and the shock waves sent up your leg physically crushes and destroys a small number of red blood cells in the capillaries of your feet.
So I am literally stomping my own blood cells to death with every step.
Over tens of thousands of foot strikes, you accumulate massive red blood cell destruction. Now, a healthy, well-fueled body uses dietary iron, protein, and energy to constantly manufacture fresh red blood cells in the bone marrow to replace the ones you crushed.
Good if you're in REDs.
An athlete in REDs lacks the caloric energy and the raw nutrients to fuel the bone marrow. The factory shuts down. Not only do you develop severe anemia, meaning a low red blood cell count, but the studies show that the red blood cells you do manage to produce become rigid.
Rigid, like they lose their flexibility.
Precisely. A healthy red blood cell is pliable. It can fold and squeeze its way through the microscopic capillaries deep in your muscle tissue to deliver oxygen. In REDs, the cells become stiff. They get jammed in the capillaries. They cannot efficiently transport oxygen.
So you could be gasping for air on a relatively easy climb, and it isn't because you skipped your hill repeats. It's because your blood physically cannot bend to deliver the oxygen to your quads. And if the oxygen isn't getting to the muscles, it's definitely not getting to the brain either. Which brings us to problem 7, cognitive decline. How does starvation impact a runner mentally on the trail? Because navigating a route-covered trail at 2 a.m. with a headlamp requires massive cognitive focus.
Well, your brain is a metabolic furnace. Even when you are just sitting still, the brain consumes about 20% of your entire resting energy expenditure. It runs almost exclusively on glucose. When you are severely underfueling, your brain is starved of its primary fuel. This manifests as severe cognitive decline. We see delayed reaction times, profound apathy, emotional volatility, and poor pacing decisions.
I've seen that late in races. Yeah. Runners just sitting on a rock, completely apathetic, not caring if they finish or not.
Exactly. But it's also incredibly dangerous. On a technical descent, a delayed reaction time doesn't just mean your split time is slower. It means you fail to lift your toe over a root, you take a catastrophic fall, and you break a bone. A bone that, as we establish, might already be hollowed out.
Everything connects. Okay, problem 8, immune system suppression. We've all seen the runner who crushes a 100-mile race and then immediately gets a massive sinus infection for 2 weeks.
Right. In a state of low energy availability, the body aggressively downregulates immune function. The secretion of key antibodies drops significantly. The body calculates that creating immune cells is just too calorically expensive. As a result, runners face recurrent upper respiratory tract infections and chronic low-grade systemic inflammation.
Which brings us to problem 9, the gut. Gastrointestinal permeability. We hear the term leaky gut thrown around a lot, but in ultra running, it is a very specific, acute medical event. What exactly is happening in the stomach?
The gut microbiome is extraordinarily sensitive to both energy availability and the physical stress of exercise. When you are starving your body and simultaneously diverting blood flow away from your stomach to cool your skin and feed your legs, the environment in your intestines becomes incredibly hostile. This lack of blood flow and fueling leads to a massive die-off of beneficial bacteria.
Like which ones?
Clinical samples taken from ultra runners post-race show drops of up to 45% in butyrate-producing bacteria. Butyrate is a fatty acid that fuels the cells lining your intestinal wall. It keeps the junctions between those cells tight. When butyrate levels crash, the barrier becomes permeable. It literally becomes leaky.
And what leaks out?
Endotoxins. Specifically lipopolysaccharides, which are toxic compounds from bacteria in your gut. They leak into your bloodstream, and your body triggers a massive systemic inflammatory response. This often manifests as overwhelming nausea, vomiting, and a complete inability to take in more calories.
Which creates a vicious cycle of starvation. So if you combine the leaky gut, the suppressed immune system, the rigid red blood cells, the cannibalized muscle, and the brittle bones, it all culminates in problem 10, performance stagnation and decline.
Ultimately, yes, you just get slower. And the tragic irony is that even if you try to fix it at the last minute, say you eat a massive bowl of pasta the night before your race, it won't work. In a state of chronic REDs, your glycogen synthesis is severely impaired. Your muscles have become insulin resistant to protect blood glucose for the brain. A clinical study demonstrated that just 14 days of severe low energy availability can cause an 8% drop in time trial performance, even if the athlete eats plenty of carbohydrates on test day.
That is a staggering overview of caloric starvation. But the sources point out that within this massive caloric deficit, there is one specific macronutrient that endurance athletes notoriously mismanage, leading to its own unique cascade of disasters. Athletes obsess over carbs, but they completely neglect protein.
It's arguably the most common nutritional error in the ultra-endurance community.
Let's look at the top 10 problems when a trail runner treats protein as an afterthought. Because running an ultra isn't just a cardiovascular effort. It involves thousands upon thousands of eccentric muscle contractions.
Eccentric meaning when the muscle is lengthening under tension.
Like when you're running downhill and your quads are acting as brakes.
Exactly. Downhill running causes massive mechanical shearing forces within the muscle fibers. The research indicates it causes 10 to 15 times more structural muscle damage than running on a flat road. You are literally tearing your muscle fibers apart on a microscopic level.
So if I'm a beginner and I'm just eating oatmeal and gels, and I am falling massively short of the recommended protein targets, which our sources put at a hefty 1.6 to 2.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, what happens? Problem one.
Problem one is failure to repair extreme muscle damage. Amino acids are the literal physical building blocks of your muscle tissue. If a tornado rips the roof off your house, you can't fix it with electricity, you need wood and nails. Carbohydrates are the electricity, protein is the wood and nails. Without adequate amino acids circulating in your bloodstream, the sheer mechanical breakdown of your quadriceps simply goes unrepaired.
And does the body just stop trying to fix it?
Yes, which is problem two. Suppressed muscle protein synthesis, or MPS. Clinical trials show that MPS pathways shut down within just 5 days of low energy and low protein availability. The body effectively turns off the genetic signaling pathways, specifically the mTOR pathway that tell the muscle to build back stronger.
That leads right into problem three, exacerbated hormonal suppression. We talked about cortisol breaking down muscle. Does a lack of dietary protein make that worse?
It exacerbates it dramatically. If you aren't consuming protein, you have a very low pool of circulating amino acids. But your vital organs still require them to function. So the body relies even more heavily on cortisol to attack your lean skeletal muscle, breaking it down to keep your liver and kidneys functioning.
Harvesting my quads to feed my liver, that perfectly explains problem four. Delayed recovery between sessions. I hear runners talk about dead legs all the time. You go out for a long run on Saturday, and by Wednesday, your legs still feel like lead.
That's a hallmark of protein deficiency. Your muscle fibers are swollen, inflamed, and structurally compromised. If you can't recover, it ruins your ability to execute back-to-back training days. You end up skipping workouts or performing them with compromised biomechanics, which leads to injury.
Now, problem five is something I found absolutely fascinating. Increased central fatigue. I always thought of protein purely in terms of muscles. How does skipping a protein shake make my brain tired?
It's a highly complex biochemical interaction. During long efforts, your muscles consume branched-chain amino acids, or BCAAs, for fuel. As they do, the concentration of BCAAs in your bloodstream drops. Now, BCAAs compete with another amino acid called tryptophan to cross the blood-brain barrier.
Tryptophan. Isn't that the stuff in turkey that supposedly makes you sleepy?
Precisely. Think of the transport mechanism like a bus going into the brain. Normally, BCAAs crowd the bus, so not much tryptophan gets in. But when your muscles consume all the BCAAs, the bus is suddenly empty. Tryptophan floods into the brain. Once inside, it's converted into serotonin. During extreme exercise, an excess of serotonin signals to the brain that you are profoundly exhausted.
So protein literally keeps your brain awake on the trail.
It really does. Maintaining adequate BCAAs keeps the tryptophan out and delays that central fatigue.
Which ties into problem six, reduced satiety and mood drops. The sources link low protein to huge mood swings during a training block.
Yes, largely tied to blood sugar regulation. If an athlete is just eating straight carbohydrates all day, their blood sugar is incredibly volatile. Massive spikes followed by catastrophic crashes. These crashes trigger adrenaline and cortisol release, which worsens mood, increases irritability, and leads to a pervasive sense of apathy toward training.
The classic hangry phenomenon stretched over a 3-month block. Okay, problem seven is loss of lean muscle mass. Let's touch on the vanity aspect, because a lot of runners avoid protein because they fear getting bulky. They want to be light for the climbs.
That's a fundamental misunderstanding. You are not eating 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram to look like a bodybuilder. For an ultra runner, adequate protein is required simply to preserve the lean mass you already have. If you don't eat it, you will become lighter, yes, but you will also become incredibly weak.
And you're losing bone too. Problem 8, increased risk of bone stress injuries. Protein is a structural component of the bone itself, right?
It is. People obsess over calcium, but the foundational structure of a bone, the matrix that holds the calcium, is made primarily of collagen. Collagen is a protein. A significant percentage of bone volume is protein-based. Chronic deficiency degrades this matrix.
Problem 9 is a very practical race day issue. Diminished flavor fatigue resistance, or sweet fatigue.
Anyone who has run past hour 12 knows this. The fuel industry is built on sugar. Gels, chews. After 12 hours of highly concentrated sugar, your palate becomes overwhelmed. You develop a visceral aversion to sweetness. If your fueling plan lacks savory, protein-rich options like jerky or nuts, you will hit a wall where you simply stop eating entirely because the thought of another gel makes you gag.
And finally, problem 10, immunosuppression. Amino acids are the weapons our immune system uses.
Exactly. They are the building blocks for synthesizing immune cells and antibodies. Compound the exercise-induced immune depression with protein deficiency, and you leave your body completely defenseless.
Okay, I am thoroughly terrified into eating more protein. But I know I can't just go out, run 30 miles, eat nothing but fruit all day, and then eat a massive 16-ounce steak right before bed and call it fixed, right?
The literature is very specific about the timing of protein intake. If I'm trying to maximize muscle repair, how do I strategically space this out? The timing is arguably as critical as the total daily intake. The body doesn't store protein the way it stores carbs as glycogen. There is no biological vault of protein to draw from later. The body needs a continuous, steady supply. To maximize muscle protein synthesis, you need to consume a bolus of 0.25 to 0.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight every 3 to 4 hours.
Let me do the math on that. If I weigh 70 kilograms, about 154 pounds, that means I need roughly 20 to 28 grams of protein every single meal or snack, 4 or 5 times a day. That's a chicken breast or a cup of Greek yogurt spaced evenly. What about the critical window right after a brutal training session?
The immediate post-exercise window, the 0 to 2 hours after you stop running, is highly leveraged. You need to combine protein with carbohydrates. The gold standard is 1.2 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram alongside 0.4 grams of protein per kilogram immediately.
Why the combination? Why not just a protein shake?
Because they work synergistically. The carbohydrates spike insulin, which drives the carbs back into the muscle to replenish glycogen. But insulin is also highly anabolic. It drives the amino acids from the protein into the muscle cells, instantly halting the catabolic muscle breakdown cascade and flipping the switch to repair mode.
And the sources emphasize evening intake too. I've always heard eating right before bed makes you gain fat.
That old myth is incredibly damaging. Sleep is your ultimate physiological repair window. While you sleep, your body naturally releases human growth hormone. If you provide your body with 40 grams of a slow-releasing protein right before bed, you give it the raw materials to use while that growth hormone is peaking. Casein protein found in cottage cheese or milk is excellent because it slowly releases amino acids over 6 to 8 hours.
And what about that specific amino acid for athletes stuck in a deficit? L-leucine.
Yes, adding a supplement of 3 to 6 grams of free L-leucine per day acts like a chemical trigger to actively turn on the MTO pathway, essentially tricking the muscle into initiating repair even when overall energy is low.
Okay, let's bring this all the way down to ground level. We have thrown an immense amount of biochemistry at the listener. If I'm a complete beginner, I don't have access to a lab to test my hormones. What are the simple early warning signs of energy deficiency? Give me the checklist.
Beginners actually have the highest risk, mostly due to unintentional LEA. They don't know a 3-hour run burns 2,000 calories, and they suffer from exercise-induced anorexia. The training suppresses the hunger hormone ghrelin, so they finish a massive run, their muscles are screaming for calories, but chemically their brain feels full, so they skip lunch.
So we can't trust our hunger cues, and the scale is a liar. What are 5 non-scale indicators a beginner should monitor?
Number 1, persistent, unresolving fatigue or severe irritability. Normal training fatigue resolves with a rest day. RED's fatigue lingers. Number 2, chronically cold hands and feet. That's your T3 plummeting. Number 3, sleep disruption, specifically difficulty staying asleep.
Waking up at 3 a.m.
Yes. Your liver runs out of glycogen to keep blood sugar stable. To save your brain, your body spikes adrenaline and cortisol to liberate glucose, and that adrenaline jolts you awake. Number 4 is a persistent sense of feeling physically flat despite consistent training. And number 5 is recurring, lingering illnesses.
Now let's contrast the specific warning signs between male and female runners.
Yeah.
What is the absolute red flag for women?
For females, it's missing or irregular periods, functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, but I must explicitly note a critical misconception. A withdrawal bleed from oral contraceptives is not a true period. It's chemically induced and can completely mask REDs. You could be losing bone mass, but the pill makes you look hormonally normal on the surface.
And for men, they don't have a monthly cycle to track.
The primary physical indicator for men is the loss of morning erections. This is a direct barometer of plummeting testosterone. They will also experience a sharp decline in overall libido and a gradual inability to hit high-intensity paces.
And circling back to the heart rate issue, if I'm a beginner and my resting heart rate drops to 40, how do I know if it's fitness or REDs?
Look at the whole picture. If your heart rate is 40 but you feel energetic, your times are faster, and your libido is normal, that's fitness. If it's 40 but you're freezing, waking up at 3 a.m. and your easy runs feel like dragging a sled, that's REDs bradycardia. Your heart is atrophying.
Okay, identifying the problem is step 1. Involving a support team is crucial here, right? Because when you're in that brain-fogged state, you might not notice these signs.
Absolutely. Having a partner, a coach, or a running buddy who knows these signs is vital. They will notice your irritability or your pale skin before you do.
Step 2 is building the engine through proper macronutrient planning. Let's talk about calculating daily macros based on training volume, specifically carbohydrate periodization. How do we safely implement this for ultra training?
Carbohydrates are the master fuel. Generally, ultra runners need 5 to 8 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram per day, but during peak volume weeks, that must scale up dramatically, approaching 10 grams per kilogram.
But what about train low, compete high? Fasted morning runs to burn fat.
Strategic low-carb training, like a low-intensity fasted morning run, can upregulate transporters and mitochondrial biogenesis. But the absolute key is low intensity. Intense sessions, hill sprints, tempo runs must be heavily fueled with carbs to protect the intensity and prevent cortisol spikes. Chronic low-carb living drives up cortisol and leads straight to REDs.
And we can't forget fats. What are the evidence-based fat intake targets to support hormonal health?
Athletes should target 1.0 to 1.5 grams of fat per kilogram per day. Fat provides the essential cholesterol molecules to synthesize testosterone and estrogen. You want high-quality sources: walnuts, chia seeds, extra virgin olive oil, oily fish. Some coaches implement fat adaptation phases like 7 to 10 days of 60 to 70% fat early in a training block to improve metabolic flexibility. But as high-intensity speed work or race day approaches, carbs must reclaim the throne.
Let's talk about adjusting calories on recovery days. If I run 20 miles on Saturday, but Sunday's a rest day, should I eat way less on Sunday because my volume dropped?
No, that's a huge mistake. Your body is doing massive repair work on Sunday. The metabolic fire is still burning. If you aggressively cut calories on your rest day, you starve the repair process. You need to maintain a strong intake. Slightly dropping carbs, perhaps, but keeping protein and healthy fats very high.
Okay, so you can calculate your macros perfectly at home. But if your stomach violently rejects them at mile 40, it doesn't matter. You have to train your gut just like you train your legs.
Yeah.
Let's provide a practical guide for training the gut. Why do so many ultra runners throw up?
Because of gut ischemia. When you run, blood is diverted to your muscles and skin. Gut transit slows to a crawl. You are asking a blood-deprived stomach to process massive calories.
So how does a new runner practice gut training? Give us the checklist.
Step 1, start early. Begin 8 to 12 weeks before race day. Step 2, progressive loading. Start at 30 grams of carbs per hour on long runs, progressing eventually to 60 to 120. Step 3, dual fuels.
Explain dual fuels for the beginners.
Use a 1.0.8 or 2.1 glucose to fructose ratio. Your intestines have different doors for different sugars. If you only consume glucose, you overwhelm the glucose door, causing a bottleneck and bloating. Fructose uses a different door. By consuming both, you utilize multiple doors at once.
Step 4 is practice with real food, right? Essential gut training foods.
Yes, use exactly what you will race with: gels, fuel bars, peanut butter, and jelly sandwiches. And step 5, if you are sensitive, trial low FODMA foods to reduce fermentable carbs. Also, post-run, consume polyphenols, cloudy apple juice, dark chocolate, green tea, along with probiotics to repair the gut barrier.
Let's put this all together into a 24-hour fueling flow chart for a heavy training day or a race day. Walk us through this schedule.
Pre-event, 3 days out. Glycogen supercompensation, 8 to 10 grams per kilogram of carbs. lower your fiber to reduce GI bulk, 1 hour pre-run, 500 milligrams sodium nitrates, and 100 to 150 milligram caffeine.
Early effort, 0 to 4 hours.
Prioritize fast liquid and gel carbohydrates, 60 to 90 grams per hour. Maintain blood glucose.
Mid-effort, 4 to 10 hours.
Palate diversity. The appeal of sweet flavors dies. Introduce solid foods, small cheese rolls, salted rice balls, PB&J wraps. Begin small doses of protein, 5 to 10 grams an hour to stave off central fatigue.
Late effort, 10 plus hours.
Combat nausea. Switch to savory, hot, salty items, broth, mashed potatoes, jerky, salted nuts. Fat becomes a critical dense energy source here since your pace has likely slowed.
And hydration.
450 to 750 milliliters of fluid per hour. Crucially, fluids must have more than 500 milligrams of sodium per liter to prevent exercise-associated hyponatremia, a dangerous drop in blood sodium from drinking too much plain water.
Finally, immediate recovery, 0 to 2 hours post-run.
1.2 grams per kilogram of carbs plus 0.4 grams per kilogram of protein immediately to halt muscle breakdown.
This physical fueling is mapped out perfectly. But in the depths of an ultra, the mind often breaks before the body. Let's talk about mind, mood, and female-specific physiology. Low energy availability suppresses dopamine, right?
Yes, it spikes irritability. Data from a 120-mile Arctic ultra showed that mental toughness, not sleep, was the biggest predictor of emotional stability. Carbohydrate intake is intrinsically linked to decision-making and cognitive stamina.
And women have a unique physiological profile here. They oxidize 24 to 56% more fat at submaximal intensities. That's a huge fatigue resistance advantage. But a lot of female athletes think, if I burn more fat naturally, I should eat fewer carbs.
Absolutely not. Dropping carbs triggers the estrogen suppression cascade, leading to RADs, bone loss, and immune failure. Women still require 30 to 60 grams of carbs an hour to maintain cognitive function and protect their endocrine system. Furthermore, women are more prone to GI distress due to slower gut transit times, and they have a higher risk for hyponatremia if they overconsume plain water due to smaller body mass.
This has been a massive paradigm shift, treating energy availability not as a weight loss game, but as a master regulator of human performance. We've mapped out the dangers of calorie and protein deficits, how to train the gut, how to fuel across the lifespan of a heavy effort.
The takeaway is you must track your energy availability and respect your biological limits. Leanness is not a proxy for fitness. Biological resilience repairing tissue, keeping bones dense, maintaining your endocrine system is what gets you to the finish line.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We spend thousands of dollars on carbon-plated shoes, GPS watches, and aerodynamic hydration vests to shave seconds off our pace. But what if the greatest performance-enhancing tool you have isn't something you wear, but the absolute courage to eat more than you think you need? Think about how much faster you could be if your body finally felt safe enough to let you fly. Look at complex systems like, say, the dashboard of your car. There's this really comforting expectation of precision. It's binary, right?
Right, yeah, very logical.
Exactly. The fuel light clicks on, you pull over, you put gas in the tank, and the light goes off. It's just a clean, perfectly predictable transaction of energy.
Which is exactly what we expect from our bodies, too.
Right. I mean, you feel a pang in your stomach, you eat a sandwich, and the hunger goes away. Problem solved.
It's a simple cause and effect relationship. And, we rely on that just to get through a normal Tuesday. We like our biological systems to feel manageable.
But then you step into the world of ultra endurance sports. And man, you look at what happens to the human body at like mile 80 of a 100-mile foot race. And suddenly that dashboard is completely shattered.
Oh, it's completely out the window.
The fuel light is screaming, but the tank is literally refusing to open. The engine is overheating, but the cooling system is just shut down.
Yeah, and your navigation system is hallucinating things on the side of the road.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are looking at a physiological and psychological landscape that is honestly just pure chaos.
Chaos is the perfect word for it.
And if you look at the sources we've pulled for this deep dive, we've got academic papers from the Turkish Journal of Sports Medicine. We've got these intense psychological meta-analyses, and then the gritty battle-tested field manuals from organizations like Cadence, Mulebar, and Trail Runner Nation. You quickly realize something.
What's that?
We're not just looking at sports nutrition here. We're looking at a survival manual for the human body at its absolute breaking point.
It is the absolute definition of biological muddy waters. I mean, the neat equations of calories in versus calories out, they just completely disintegrate under that level of extreme stress.
Right.
And to truly understand this, we really have to look at the central concept that defines this sport, which is the caloric chasm.
The caloric chasm. I love that term. Even though it sounds like some terrifying geological feature you'd fall into.
It kind of is.
Let's unpack that right out of the gate, because we aren't talking about a casual weekend jog here.
Not at all. During an event extending beyond 24 hours, so whether that is 50 miles, 100 miles, or like a multi-day stage race in a hostile environment, a runner might burn anywhere from 13,000 to over 17,000 calories.
17,000 calories. That is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around.
It is. But here is the catch. And this is really the foundation of the chasm. The human digestive system has a hard biological ceiling on what it can actually absorb while running.
So you can't just eat 17,000 calories on the go.
Exactly. At best, athletes are only able to replace about 36 to 53% of what they are burning in real time.
Wow. So they are operating in this massive yawning deficit the entire time.
The entire sport is essentially a race to the finish line before that deficit causes a catastrophic systemic failure of the human machine.
Which is why understanding this isn't just for the elite athlete, right?
No, not at all. The rules of biology that apply at mile 80 actually teach us profound lessons about how our bodies, our brains, and our digestive systems function every single day.
Which is exactly why this deep dive is for you. Because, whether you are currently prepping for your very first 50K, or whether you manage or coach endurance athletes, or even if you are simply insanely curious about the absolute outer limits of human endurance, we are going to extract the mechanisms behind these extremes.
We're going to cover the gut-brain connection, how to actually fuel the machine, and crucially, how to conquer the dreaded mid-race meltdown.
Right. But if we want to understand how to fuel the body, we first have to understand what it looks like when the body is fundamentally starving.
Exactly. You have to recognize the deficit.
So let's start right there. Before we can even talk about how to eat, we have to talk about how to spot the deficit.
Right.
So what are the top 5 signs ultra runners are starting a race under eating? Because according to the sources, a lot of athletes are completely depleted before the starting gun even goes off.
Yeah, they are walking into a crisis. And to understand this, we need to make a crucial distinction between chronic underfueling, which happens over months of relentless training, and the acute disastrous mistakes made on race day.
Okay, so let's start with the chronic stuff.
The chronic condition is known in the medical and sports science communities as RDS. That stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport.
RDE tests. Got it.
And it is incredibly insidious because athletes often mistake the symptoms for just, training hard.
Oh, they just normalize the suffering. Like, I'm supposed to feel this terrible.
Exactly. So sign number 1 of RADS is a high frequency of bone stress injuries. The literature notes that up to 21% of female ultra runners experience bone stress injuries, like stress fractures or stress reactions.
21%.
Yeah.
That is a staggering portion of the field running on fundamentally compromised hardware.
It really is.
But let's look at the mechanism there. Why does a lack of food translate to a broken bone? Because I think people assume bones are just static scaffolding, but they're living tissue, right?
Yeah. Oh, they are highly metabolically active. Your bones are constantly in a state of remodeling. You have cells called osteoclasts that break down old, micro-damaged bone tissue, and osteoblasts that come in and build fresh, strong bone.
Okay.
This process requires a massive amount of ATP cellular energy. When your overall energy availability is chronically low, the body basically conducts a brutal triage.
Like it has to pick what lives and what dies.
Right. It looks at the energy budget and says, well, we don't have enough calories to keep the heart pumping, the lungs breathing, and rebuild the skeletal system, so halt all bone maintenance.
Oh, wow. So the osteoblasts just go on strike.
Exactly. And because the runner is still pounding the pavement for 60 miles a week, creating micro damage with every step, the bone just hollows out and eventually snaps.
That makes total sense, but it's terrifying. What's sign number 2?
Sign number 2 is profound hormonal suppression. Again, that same energetic triage affects the endocrine system. The body shuts down non-essential functions to conserve energy for basic survival.
Which manifests how?
In female athletes, this often manifests as amenorrhea, or the cessation of the menstrual cycle. In male athletes, it manifests as drastically lowered testosterone levels.
Which sounds like an evolutionary survival mechanism kicking
Yeah.
in, right? The brain is perceiving a famine environment and deciding now is absolutely not the time to reproduce or build massive, metabolically expensive muscles.
That's exactly it. It is a systemic downregulation. And that leads us to sign number 3, which extends right into the gastrointestinal tract.
Right, persistent GI dysfunction.
Yeah. We often think of GI distress as something that only happens during the intense effort of a race, but a major sign of chronic RADS is persistent daily gastrointestinal dysfunction.
So we're talking about chronic stomach issues, bloating and malabsorption, even during like a low intensity, easy Tuesday morning jog.
Exactly. If your stomach is a mess on a slow recovery run, that's not normal.
But why does the gut fail just because you skipped a few meals over the month?
Because the gut lining is one of the most rapidly regenerating tissues in the human body. The cells lining your intestines turn over every few days. And this rapid cellular division requires, again, an immense amount of energy.
So it's another casualty of the triage.
Right. When you are in a chronic deficit, the body just can't maintain that mucosal lining or the smooth muscle contractions, the motility required to push food through. The gut functionally atrophies.
Wow. So you're eroding your ability to absorb nutrients, which only worsens the caloric deficit. It's a vicious cycle.
It is. And sign number 4 follows the exact same logic. A compromised immune system.
Oh, I imagine the immune system suffers the exact same fate.
It does. Athletes with REDS show a very noticeable increase in upper respiratory tract infections.
Wow.
They're always catching the common cold, always battling a lingering cough that they just can't seem to shake.
Because the white blood cells need energy to proliferate.
Exactly. The immune system relies on the rapid proliferation of white blood cells to fight off pathogens, which is highly energy dependent. When energy is scarce, your body simply lowers the shields.
That's fascinating. Okay, so we talked about the physical breakdown, the bones, the hormones, the gut, the immune system. What's the 5th sign?
Sign number 5 is far more subtle and, frankly, far more damaging to a runner's daily life. Mood disorders and apathy.
It is so easy to dismiss a bad mood as just being tired from the miles, but the sources say this is actually a chemical cry for help.
It is a profound neurochemical consequence of starvation. Chronic undereating elevates cortisol, which is your primary stress hormone, because the body views starvation as a life-threatening stressor.
Right.
Simultaneously, it suppresses the production of dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for drive, reward, and motivation. This dual action leads to prolonged irritability, clinical symptoms of depression, and just a complete loss of motivation to train.
So when a dedicated athlete suddenly hates their sport, it might not be burnout. It might literally just be starvation.
It's the brain pulling the emergency brake.
Okay, so all of those factors cover the chronic long-term deficit. But what happens when we shift our focus to the acute, chaotic environment of race day?
Right, the gun goes off, they are 50 miles deep into the mountains, and they are plunging into the caloric chasm.
Exactly. Let's get into that acute environment. What are the top 5 signs ultra runners need to eat more during a race? What are the immediate flashing red lights on the dashboard?
This psychological early warning system here is fascinating. Sign number 1 that an athlete needs calories right now is a wave of sudden disproportionate negativity.
Disproportionate negativity, like suddenly hating the race, hating the beautiful mountain scenery, hating the crew that is there to help you.
Yes, a massive crushing wave of mental fog, irritability, or depression that seems entirely disconnected from the actual physical fatigue in the legs.
Oh, I see.
An athlete might feel physically fine, their pace is steady, but their mind just goes to a very dark, pessimistic place. This is a direct result of neuroglycopenia.
Let's break that word down. Neuro meaning brain, glyco meaning sugar, and penia meaning a deficiency or lack of. So literally a starving brain.
Exactly. The human brain is an absolute energy hog. It accounts for about 2% of our body weight, but consumes roughly 20% of our circulating glucose.
Wow.
When blood sugar drops, the brain is the first organ to panic. Its executive function, the prefrontal cortex, which regulates emotions, logical reasoning, and emotional control, begins to fail due to lack of fuel.
Okay, so if you are out on a trail and you suddenly want to sit on a rock and cry because your shoelace is untied,
Yeah.
you don't need a motivational speech or a hug. You need a carbohydrate.
You absolutely do. And if you don't get that carbohydrate, neuroglycopenia progresses into acute sign number 2. Overwhelming lethargy.
Is it feeling exhausted?
It's more than that. It's a sudden, intense, almost gravitational desire to just lie down in the dirt and go to sleep.
Now, obviously, running 50 miles makes you tired, but the sources point out that this specific lethargy is actually a chemical override switch, right? It's not just muscle damage.
Correct. It's a phenomenon known as central fatigue, and the mechanism is incredibly elegant.
How did it work?
When you deplete your glycogen stores, your body's carbohydrate reserves, your muscles start pulling in more branched chain amino acids from the bloodstream to use for emergency fuel.
Okay.
But as those specific amino acids leave the blood, it changes the overall amino acid ratio. This allows a different amino acid, tryptophan, to easily cross the blood-brain barrier.
Wait, tryptophan, like the stuff in turkey that supposedly makes you sleepy after Thanksgiving dinner?
The very same. Once tryptophan floods the brain, it is rapidly synthesized into serotonin. Now, we often think of serotonin as a happy chemical, right?
Usually.
But in the context of extreme endurance, an overwhelming spike in serotonin relative to dopamine signals the brain to feel incredibly sleepy and relaxed. It essentially shuts down the sensation of effort.
That is mind-blowing. The body is literally chemically drugging you with serotonin to force you to stop running and stop burning fuel. It's a forced shutdown.
It really is. And as that shutdown happens, we see sign number 3, cognitive decline and profound confusion.
Which makes sense if the brain is shutting down.
Right. This is where you see runners unable to perform basic tasks. They lose the ability to do simple math, like calculating their pace per mile or figuring out how long it will take to get to the next aid station.
They might struggle to open the zipper on their backpack, or they get confused navigating a well-marked, obvious trail.
Exactly.
Here's where I want to introduce an analogy. Running an ultra with a depleted gas tank is exactly like trying to run a massive, complex computer program like rendering a 4K video on a laptop with a dying battery.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. The software, your mental toughness, your months of training, your deep desire to finish the race might be absolutely state of the art. But if the hardware, the physical brain lacks power, the system forcefully closes applications to keep the vital organs running.
The executive function is the first background application to be force quit to save power.
It doesn't matter how good your mental software is if the screen goes black.
Exactly. And as the brain is desperately searching for power, it triggers acute sign number 4. Intense, obsessive cravings for salty or savory foods.
The sources refer to this as sweet fatigue.
Yes, sweet fatigue. For the first several hours of a race, runners are diligently downing sweet, syrupy gels, sports drinks, and fruit. But eventually, the very thought of anything sweet might induce a physical gag reflex.
And instead, they start obsessing over, like, potato chips, salted broth, or a slice of pizza.
Precisely.
But why does the body suddenly reject the exact simple sugars it needs for rapid energy?
It is a mechanism called sensory-specific satiety. The body is signaling that it desperately needs calories, but the brain recognizes that relying purely on simple sugars is throwing the body's osmotic balance and sodium levels out of whack.
Oh, I see.
So it initiates a neurological block against sweet flavors to physically force the runner to seek out other macronutrients, specifically fats, proteins, and crucial sodium, to restore homeostasis.
It makes you gag on a gel so you'll go eat a potato. That is brilliant.
The body knows what it needs.
But if you ignore all of these signs, the negativity, the lethargy, the confusion, the sweet fatigue, you hit the 5th and final, most extreme acute sign. And this is the one I find absolutely wild.
Anomalous perceptual experiences, hallucinations.
It sounds absurd to anyone outside the sport, but it's incredibly common in races lasting longer than 24 hours, right?
It is. The sources detail runners seeing imaginary objects with vivid clarity, a woman rollerblading through a remote mountain pass, giant green lizards on the trail, or airplanes parked in the dense woods.
Okay, I have to ask, how does a lack of food and sleep cause you to see a rollerblader on a mountain?
When severe sleep deprivation combines with a massive calorie deficit and profound neuroglycopenia, the visual cortex and the brain's pattern recognition software basically start to glitch.
Just misfiring completely.
Yeah. The brain is desperately trying to make sense of ambiguous sensory input-like shadows cast by a headlamp on a tree root. Normally, the awake brain filters that out, but in this state, the brain essentially starts to dream while you are physically awake. It projects dream imagery onto the waking world to fill in the gaps of its failing processing power. It is a profound neurological failure state.
Hearing all of this, just the sheer trauma the body goes through, I have to push back on something fundamental.
Sure, what is it?
I have to ask the obvious question that I'm sure every listener is thinking right now. If the body is in such a severe deficit, if it is burning 15,000 calories and the brain is starving to the point of hallucinations, why doesn't the body just make us feel hungry like a normal person?
It's a great question.
I mean, if I skip lunch at the office, my stomach growls, my mouth waters, and I actively want a sandwich. Why does an ultra runner's body hide the hunger and instead give them depression and visions of green lizards?
You've just articulated the great biological paradox of ultra running, and it is the crux of why this sport is so incredibly difficult to manage.
Okay, explain it to me.
When you need food the most, your body actively suppresses the physical desire and the mechanical ability to process it. It all comes down to a physiological event called splanchnic ischemia.
Splanchnic ischemia. This is the big one. Let's really break down the mechanics of this because this is the invisible villain of endurance sports.
Splanchnic refers to the visceral organs, specifically the gastrointestinal tract, your stomach, and intestines. Ischemia means a restriction or inadequate supply of blood flow.
So a lack of blood to the gut.
Exactly. And the scale of this restriction is massive. During intense, prolonged exertion, your body is forced to make a critical triage decision.
Another triage.
Yep. To keep you moving, it takes up to 80% of the oxygenated blood flow that normally services your digestive tract and forcefully shunts it to your working skeletal muscles.
80%.
And additionally, a huge portion of that blood is diverted to the skin for thermoregulation sweating to keep your core temperature from boiling over.
Let's use an analogy here to visualize this. Imagine your bloodstream is like a city's municipal water pressure during a massive 5-alarm fire.
Ooh, I like this.
The brain is the fire chief. It sees the leg muscles burning up. It sees the core temperature rising. So it diverts all the city's water pressure to the fire hoses at the scene of the emergency.
Yeah,
But your stomach is like a quiet suburb on the outskirts of the city. Because all the water is at the fire, the suburb gets 0 water pressure. If you try to turn on the faucet or flat a toilet in that suburb, which is the equivalent of eating a dense energy bar, nothing happens. The plumbing doesn't work. The food just sits there in the pipes.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The plumbing completely stops working. But the consequences of splanchnic ischemia go far beyond just a sluggish stomach. It actually causes acute physical damage.
Wait, actual damage?
Yes.
Ew.
The intestinal barrier, the wall that keeps the contents of your gut separate from your bloodstream, requires a constant supply of oxygen-rich blood to maintain its tight cellular junctions.
Like the mortar between the bricks.
Exactly. And when you restrict that blood flow by 80% for hours on end, those tight junctions begin to break down and separate. This creates what the medical community calls a leaky gut.
Now, I know leaky gut is a massive buzzword in wellness and diet circles, often used pretty vaguely. But here we are talking about acute, real-time, mechanically induced trauma.
Yes, this is measurable clinical permeability. And when the gut leaks, it allows endotoxins, specifically a molecule called lipopolysaccharide, or LPS, which is found on the outer membrane of gut bacteria, to slip out of the digestive tract and cross directly into the systemic bloodstream.
So the bacteria from your intestines are literally escaping into your blood.
The toxic byproducts of them, yes. And when the body's immune system detects these endotoxins in the blood, it triggers a massive systemic inflammatory response.
Like it thinks you have an infection.
Right. It releases cytokines. Your body essentially believes it is experiencing a severe infection or toxic shock. And the immediate biological response to this level of toxicity is profound, paralyzing nausea.
Wow. So when a runner is doubled over vomiting at mile 40, it's not just because their stomach is sloshing around from the running motion. They are literally experiencing a low-grade toxic shock response from their own gut bacteria leaking into their blood.
That is exactly the mechanism. And on top of this mechanical breakdown and toxic leak, there is a coordinated hormonal rebellion ensuring you never feel a pang of hunger.
Hormonal rebellion.
Yeah. High-intensity exercise heavily suppresses ghrelin, which is the primary hormone secreted by your stomach to make you feel hungry. Simultaneously, the physical stress elevates hormones like PYY and GLP-1.
GLP-1, wait, isn't that the mechanism behind all those massive new weight loss drugs like Ozempic?
Yes. GLP-1 slows gastric emptying and sends powerful signals to the brain that you are completely full.
That's crazy.
So during an ultra, your body is naturally flooding your system with the exact same hormonal signals used in anti-obesity medications. Your hormones are screaming at your brain, "We are stuck, do not eat another bite," while your muscles are screaming, "We were starving to death."
It is a complete communication breakdown between the systems. So, knowing this terrifying reality, what does a runner do?
Well, you have to prevent it.
Exactly. We are going to get into how to fix a meltdown later, but let's talk pure prevention. How do we stop the leaky gut and the toxic shock before it starts? Let's go through the top 5 things ultra runners can do so they never have gut issues in a race.
Preventative measures are the holy grail of this sport, and the absolute number one on the list is non-negotiable. You must commit to a structured 12-week gut training protocol.
Right.
You cannot just hope for the best on race day. You have to treat the stomach and the intestines like trainable muscles.
We are going to dive incredibly deep into the exact mechanics of that 12-week protocol in our next section, but that's clearly the foundational step. What is preventative measure number 2?
Avoiding routine NSAIDs. This is a massive issue in the endurance community. Many runners routinely take preemptive painkillers like ibuprofen, naproxen, or aspirin during a race to manage the inevitable muscle ache and joint pain.
It seems logical, right? My knees are going to hurt. I'll take a couple of Advil to get ahead of the inflammation. Why is that a bad idea?
Because of the specific mechanism of how NSAIDs work. NSAIDs reduce pain by inhibiting enzymes called cyclooxygenases, or COX enzymes.
Okay.
These enzymes produce prostaglandins, which cause inflammation and pain. But here is the critical flaw. Prostaglandins are also the exact lipid compounds that the stomach relies on to stimulate the production of its protective mucosal lining.
Oh, wow. So by blocking the pain, you are turning off the stomach's ability to defend itself.
Precisely. Without that mucosal shield, the corrosive stomach acid, combined with the physical bouncing of running and the lack of blood flow from ischemia, absolutely destroys the gut lining.
That sounds like a disaster.
It is. The sources show that taking NSAIDs during an ultra increases intestinal permeability by 3 to 5 times over baseline running. It dramatically worsens the leaky gut phenomenon, floods your blood with endotoxins, and significantly raises the risk of acute kidney injury.
So popping an Advil at mile 40 isn't managing pain. It is literally throwing gasoline on the inflammatory fire in your gut.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, rule 3 for prevention. What is the third thing they can do?
Dial in your fluid osmolality. This refers to the concentration of particles, specifically carbohydrates and electrolytes, in your sports drink compared to the concentration of your blood.
Explain how that works inside the stomach.
You want to aim for an isotonic or slightly hypotonic solution, which usually translates to a 6 to 8% carbohydrate mix.
What happens if it's too strong?
If you use a hypertonic drink, meaning you've mixed it way too strong, overly concentrated with thick sugars, it sits in your stomach like a heavy syrup. And by the laws of osmosis, water always moves toward the higher concentration of solutes to balance things out.
So instead of the water from the drink going into your body, the body pulls water out of your bloodstream and into your intestines to dilute the heavy syrup.
Exactly. You are literally dehydrating your own blood into your gut. This rapid influx of water into the intestines causes severe bloating, uncomfortable sloshing, and eventually explosive osmotic diarrhea.
You are dehydrating yourself while simultaneously giving yourself GI distress. A double nightmare. What is the fourth preventative measure?
This one represents a massive paradigm shift in sports science over the last decade. Drink to thirst. Avoid rigid, forced hydration schedules.
Wait, hold up. I have to interrupt here. Every cross-country coach, every gym teacher I've ever had since I was 10 years old told me the exact opposite.
Okay, no, we all heard it.
The golden rule has always been drink before you're thirsty, because if you feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated and your performance is dropping. Are you telling me that advice is not just outdated, but actively dangerous?
It is actively dangerous in the context of extreme prolonged endurance. The old dogma assumed that any weight loss during a race was purely dehydration and had to be replaced ounce for ounce.
Right.
But when you force fluids on a strict schedule, regardless of your actual thirst signals, especially if you are drinking plain water or low sodium drinks, you risk a condition called exercise-associated hyponatremia, or EAH.
Hyponatremia. Break down the mechanism there.
It means a dangerously low concentration of sodium in your blood. When you overdrink plain water, you dilute your blood serum. The sodium concentration plummets.
And what does that do?
Because of osmosis, this diluted watery blood causes fluid to shift into your body's cells to try and balance the concentration. Your cells begin to swell.
And while a swollen muscle cell might just cramp, what happens when the cells in your brain start to swell?
That is the fatal flaw. The brain is encased in a rigid skull. It has no room to expand. When brain cells swell from hyponatremia, it leads to cerebral edema. It causes confusion, seizures, coma, and eventually death.
Wow.
While mild dehydration will certainly slow your pace and make you feel terrible, severe hyponatremia can kill you. Overdrinking plain water is statistically far more dangerous in an ultra than mild dehydration.
That is a chilling realization. The misguided cure for dehydration can kill you faster than the dehydration itself if you aren't listening to the evolutionary thirst mechanism your body already has.
Trust your thirst. It is a highly evolved, perfectly calibrated sensor.
Okay, so that's 4. What's the 5th preventative measure?
The 5th involves the days leading up to the event. Implement a pre-race, low FODMAP diet.
FODMAs are specific types of fermentable carbohydrates.
Yes, fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols.
Quite the mouthful.
It is. Basically, these are short-chain carbohydrates found in things like onions, garlic, beans, apples, and certain grains that are poorly absorbed in the small intestine. When they reach the large intestine, the gut bacteria aggressively ferment them, producing large amounts of gas.
Which is fine on a normal day, but a disaster when your gut is under ischemic stress.
Exactly. For runners with sensitive stomachs, drastically reducing these fermentable fibers and heavy fats 3 days prior to the race does 2 things.
What are they?
First, it reduces fecal bulk, literally emptying the cargo hold. Second, it minimizes the fermentable substrate available to your microbiome, which drastically reduces the potential for deep, painful gas and bloating during the race.
It makes total sense. Empty the cargo hold and stop feeding the gas-producing bacteria before you take the ship into a hurricane.
That's a great analogy.
So earlier you mentioned that the absolute foundation of preventing these issues is a 12-week gut training protocol.
Yes, the most important step.
Since the gut is the ultimate gatekeeper for all this fuel, how does a runner actually train their stomach to handle the massive requirement of up to 400 calories an hour without getting sick? We talked about it like a muscle. How does it adapt?
The physiology of gut adaptation is brilliant. We often think of the digestive tract as just a static, inert pipe, but it is highly adaptable, responsive tissue. When you consistently expose your intestines to high carbohydrate loads during physical exercise, your body physically changes the architecture of the gut wall. It upregulates the density and the activity of specific sugar transporter proteins.
Okay, let's visualize these transporters. How do they work?
Think of the intestinal wall as a massive highway toll plaza, and the sugar molecules in your gut are the cars trying to get through the tolls and into the bloodstream.
Right.
Glucose relies on a specific toll booth called SGLT1, sodium glucose linked transporter 1.
So SGLT1 is the toll booth for glucose, but it only has so many lanes open, right?
Precisely. In an untrained gut, you might only have enough SGLT1 toll booths to process about 60 grams of glucose per hour.
Okay, so what happens if you take in more?
If you consume 90 grams of pure glucose in an hour, 30 grams get stuck in traffic. They back up in the gut, pull in water through osmosis, and cause bloating and diarrhea.
The traffic jam ruins the race.
Yes. Gut training physically builds more SGLT1 toll booths, expanding the highway so more glucose can enter the blood without causing a traffic jam. It also accelerates your gastric emptying rate, meaning the stomach learns to push the food into the intestines faster rather than letting it sit and ferment.
So how do we actually structure this training? Walk us through the 12-week plan, phase by phase, using real foods.
The protocol is broken into 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is the initiation phase, covering weeks 1 through 4.
Okay, what's the focus?
The focus here has absolutely nothing to do with speed or pacing. The sole focus is volume tolerance.
What does that look like in practice?
It looks uncomfortable. You want to perform low-intensity, easy runs immediately after eating a large, high-carbohydrate meal.
Like right after?
Right after. Eat a massive plate of pasta or a huge bowl of dense oatmeal, and then go out the door and run.
That sounds miserable. The sloshing, the heaviness.
It is miserable for the first few weeks, but there is a specific anatomical goal. The stomach wall is lined with mechanoreceptors, nerves that sense physical stretch. Normally, when the stomach stretches, these nerves send panic signals to the brain to stop exercising because you are full. By running with a full, heavy stomach, you are systematically desensitizing those mechanoreceptors.
Oh, I see. You're training the nerves.
You are neurologically teaching your body not to panic when there is physical weight in the stomach during exertion.
Okay, so phase 1 is stretching the stomach and calming the nervous system with volume. What is phase 2?
Phase 2 is development, covering weeks 5 through 8. Now that the stomach can handle the physical volume, we target specific carbohydrate numbers.
That's the target.
The goal here is to ingest 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour during your long weekend runs. This is also the critical window to test different textures and formats.
So figuring out if you prefer liquid calories or solid food.
Yes. See how your body handles thick liquid gels versus solid gummy chews versus real foods like bananas, boiled potatoes, or sweet potato puree, you need to map out your own personal tolerances.
Test it all out. And then the final phase where we really push the limits.
Phase 3 is specificity, weeks 9 through 12. Here, you push the intake to 90 grams per hour, or even up to 120 grams for elite athletes. And to do this, you must use dual fuel sources.
Explain the dual fuel concept using our toll booth analogy.
Remember that SGLT1 is the toll booth for glucose, and it maxes out. If you want to push past that traffic jam, you have to use a different sugar that utilizes a completely different set of toll booths. Fructose is absorbed through a transporter called GLUT5.
So you route the traffic through two different tunnels.
Exactly. By combining glucose and fructose at a specific ratio, the science heavily supports a 1.0, 0.8, or 2.1 ratio of glucose to fructose. You utilize both the SGLT1 and GLUT5 transporters simultaneously.
Bypassing the bottleneck entirely.
Yes, you bypass the bottleneck and flood the system with energy. This phase 3 also includes what we call 3-day load simulations.
What's that?
You run long distances on fatigued legs for 3 consecutive days to perfectly mimic the late race digestive fatigue and systemic inflammation you will experience in the actual ultra.
I want to pause here. We've talked about 120 grams an hour, dual fuel transporters, and massive volume loads.
It's a lot.
It is. For the listener who is completely new to this, someone who is prepping for their very first 50K or half marathon and is feeling entirely overwhelmed, what are some simple nutrition tips for a first-time ultra runner? How do novices safely build gut tolerance without risking burnout or constant sickness?
For a novice, the rules are simple but absolute. Rule 1, start incredibly small.
How small?
Begin your training runs with just 30 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Let the gut adapt. Do not jump straight to elite targets like 90 grams, or you will overload those untrained transporters and end up locked in the bathroom.
Start slow. Makes sense. What's rule 2?
Rule 2, test absolutely everything in training. Never, ever try a new brand of gel, a new sports drink flavor, or a new real food snack on race day. The golden rule is nothing new on race day.
And the overarching lesson here is that you have to respect the gut just as much as your legs.
Absolutely. Rule 3, missing your gut training guarantees a DNF did not finish. You can do all the track workouts, all the hill repeats, but if you neglect to train your gut to absorb fuel, your legs won't matter. You will run out of gas.
The analogy I keep coming back to is breaking in a new pair of heavy, stiff leather hiking boots.
Oh, that's perfect.
Gut training is exactly like stretching out those boots. You have to wear them around the house a little bit at a time, maybe for 20 minutes a day, letting the thick leather slowly warm up and mold to the exact shape of your feet. Then you wear them on a short walk, then a longer hike.
All right.
If you just take them straight out of the box on race morning and try to run 50 miles up a mountain, you're going to get massive, agonizing, race-ending blisters. In this case, the blister is severe nausea, leaky gut, and a ruined race.
That is a perfect visualization of tissue adaptation. You have to mold the gut slowly and intentionally over time.
So, assuming our listener has diligently trained their gut, they've broken in the leather shoes over 12 weeks, and they are standing on the starting line. Let's move the timeline to race day execution.
Let's do it.
What exactly should they be eating? And importantly, how does that menu change as the hours drag on? Because you can't just eat the same gel for 20 hours straight.
You absolutely cannot because of the sensory-specific satiety and flavor fatigue we discussed earlier. The best way to map out the top 5 foods an ultra runner's stomach can easily digest is chronologically, based on the timeline of the race.
Okay, let's go chronological. What's number 1?
Number 1, for the early stages hours, 0 to roughly 4, is agave syrup gels.
Okay, I have to zero in on this one because the sources, specifically the text from Molbar, advocate heavily for natural agave over the highly processed corn maltodextrin that makes up 90% of the sports gels on the market.
Yes, they do.
But I have to ask, is natural sugar actually scientifically better? Or is this just a really good organic marketing buzzword? Isn't sugar just sugar once it hits the stomach?
It is a totally valid question, but there is a profound biochemical difference in how they are absorbed.
Wow.
It comes down to the glycemic index.
Okay, explain that.
Agave syrup is extremely rich in natural fructose and has a very low glycemic index around 15. Maltodextrin, on the other hand, has a massive glycemic index, often higher than pure table sugar.
Why does that matter on hour 2 of a race?
Because maltodextrin causes a violent spike in blood sugar, which triggers a massive release of insulin from the pancreas to manage it.
And then comes the crash.
Exactly. That insulin rapidly pulls the sugar out of the blood, leading to a severe, crushing energy crash 30 minutes later. You become trapped in a roller coaster of spiking and crashing.
Whereas
Agave, because of its low glycemic index, provides a much more stable, slow-release energy profile. Furthermore, highly processed maltodextrin gels are often packed with artificial flavorings, synthetic preservatives, and chemical texturizers.
which are probably not great for a stressed gut.
Right. When you put those chemicals into a gut that is already highly vulnerable and inflamed from splanchnic ischemia, it acts as an irritant. Natural agave avoids chemical aggravation.
So it's about providing smooth, sustained energy and avoiding chemical irritants in a gut that is already hanging by a thread. That makes perfect sense. What is food number 2 as the race progresses?
Number 2 for the early to mid race is watermelon or natural fruit purees.
Watermelon.
Yes. As the mouth gets dry from heavy breathing, thick gels become incredibly difficult to swallow. Watermelon is mostly water, so it's naturally hydrating, and fruit purees are packed with natural antioxidants.
And those antioxidants help.
They help mitigate the systemic oxidative stress and inflammation caused by the intense muscular exertion. They go down easy and provide a rapid, refreshing hit of natural fructose.
That sounds incredibly refreshing when the sun starts beating down at mile 30. Where do we pivot for food number 3?
By hours 4 to 10, you enter the grueling mid-race phase. This is when your overall pace has naturally slowed down from a run to a jog or a hike on the steep sections. And this is when you introduce food number 3, PB&J sandwiches or hummus wraps.
Wait, peanut butter. Doesn't fat dramatically slow down gastric emptying? We just spent all this time talking about getting food through the stomach as fast as possible.
It does slow down digestion, which is exactly why you wait until the mid-race when your intensity and heart rate have dropped.
Oh, because the stomach has a bit more blood flow then.
Precisely. Introducing a small, controlled amount of fat and protein, around 5 to 10 grams per hour, does 2 vital things. First, it provides deep physical satiety. It makes the stomach feel settled and fed.
And the second thing?
Second, that slow burn of amino acids from the protein significantly delays the central fatigue in the brain we talked about earlier. It alters that tryptophan-serotonin ratio, keeping you alert. It also begins the crucial transition away from purely sweet flavors.
Okay, so you've had your PB&J, but now the sun is setting. You are in the deep, dark hours, 10, 15, 20 hours and beyond. What do you eat when your stomach is completely battered?
That is when you need food number 4. Plain boiled potatoes, usually rolled heavily in salt.
Just a salty potato.
Yep. A boiled potato is a savory, incredibly easily digestible starch. It completely breaks up the sweet fatigue. When the thought of another sugary gel makes you gag, the palate will desperately crave the umami and the starch of a salted potato.
It's just simple, real food.
It provides a massive hit of complex carbohydrates that requires very little digestive effort.
And food number 5, what is the final lifeline?
Food number 5, hot broth, chicken broth, vegetable broth, or even ramen noodle juice.
Just drinking hot soup.
Yes. In the late stages of a race, especially as night falls and the temperature plummets, hot broth is a miracle worker.
I can imagine the warmth feels amazing.
It is highly palatable, the warmth is incredibly soothing to an inflamed stomach lining, and most importantly, it serves as an excellent rapid delivery system for the massive amounts of necessary sodium you've been sweating out all day. It restores your blood volume and pulls you back from the brink of hyponatremia.
That sounds like a Michelin star meal at mile 80 in the freezing dark.
It really does.
But we've been talking about a race under normal conditions. What happens when the environment turns hostile? How does an elite athlete manage this delicate balance of high caloric intake if they are racing in extreme blistering heat or at high altitude in the mountains?
Environmental extremes act as a massive multiplier to splanchnic ischemia. They require immediate tactical adjustments to your nutrition plan. Let's take high heat first.
Okay, let's talk heat.
When you are running in 95-degree heat, your body must prioritize cooling above all else. So it diverts even more blood away from your gut, sending it rushing to your skin to facilitate massive amounts of sweating.
The fire in the city just became a raging inferno, and the gut gets absolutely zero water pressure.
Exactly. Digestion becomes exponentially harder. In extreme heat, runners must abandon solid foods almost entirely. The stomach simply cannot break them down.
So what do they consume?
You must shift to purely liquid or semi-liquid foods like highly diluted sports drinks or those smooth fruit compotes. Furthermore, you must dramatically increase your sodium intake up to 300 to 700 milligrams per hour.
Why so much sodium?
Yeah,
Just to replace the sweat.
it's deeper than that. The transport of glucose across the intestinal wall through those SGLT1 toll booths is a sodium-dependent process.
Ooh.
If you don't have enough sodium in the gut, the glucose literally cannot pass through the gate. It just sits there and rots. And crucially, in the heat, you must aggressively pace conservatively early on to prevent your core temperature from spiking, because a high core temperature directly paralyzes gastric motility.
That's a huge tip. And what about altitude? We're talking races where you are running up mountain passes at 10,000 or 12,000 feet.
Altitude presents a fascinating and incredibly frustrating biological challenge known as the anorexia of altitude.
The anorexia of altitude.
Yes. The state of hypoxia, which is the lower partial pressure of oxygen in the blood at high altitudes, actually triggers a hormonal cascade. Hypoxia directly upregulates the expression of leptin.
And leptin is.
Leptin is the primary hormone that signals total systemic fullness. It tells the brain, we have plenty of fat stored, stop eating.
So you just don't feel hungry at all.
So at altitude, your body is burning through glycogen faster than ever because it's working so hard just to breathe, but you feel completely uncomfortably stuffed. You have zero appetite.
That's a terrible combination. How do you combat that?
Athletes in the mountains must treat eating like a mechanical job. They must force feed themselves highly digestible, simple liquid carbohydrates purely by the clock, overriding their complete lack of hunger.
Just doing it because it's time.
Exactly. Additionally, they have to consciously avoid eating any large, bulky meals right before a massive, steep climb,
Why is that?
because the oxygen demand for the legs will completely rob the stomach of any chance to process the food.
So you have to treat eating like clocking into a shift at work. You do the job regardless of how you feel because the biology is lying to you.
Precisely.
But let's play devil's advocate here. Let's look at the worst case scenario.
Okay, the meltdown.
Yeah. Let's say I listened to this deep dive. I did everything right. I trained my gut for 12 weeks. I packed my low glycemic agave gels and my salted boiled potatoes. I respected the heat. I managed my sodium. But I'm at mile 60. The plan has fallen apart, and I am actively puking in a bush on the side of the trail.
It happens to the best of them.
What now?
This is the critical crucible moment in any ultramarathon. It is the moment where races are either saved or lost. And it requires the athlete or their crew to run through a very clear objective triage decision guide.
Okay, let's create a simple decision guide. How do we distinguish between manageable nausea and a medical emergency?
You have to be able to immediately differentiate between run-of-the-mill ultra nausea and a catastrophic race-ending medical emergency. Let's start with when you absolutely have to stop running and call for help.
What does a medical emergency look like?
You must pull the plug and stop immediately if your vomiting is accompanied by profound confusion, lethargy, or ataxia.
Ataxia meaning the inability to walk in a straight line or maintain your balance. Like you're intoxicated.
Yes. If you are throwing up and you can't walk straight, that is a profound neurological failure. In a hot race, that is a cardinal sign of heat stroke, meaning your brain is literally overheating.
And in altitude.
In a high altitude race, ataxia and vomiting are the primary indicators of high altitude cerebral edema or HACE brain swelling. Both are rapidly life-threatening.
That is terrifying. What is the next red flag on the triage tree?
Stop immediately if you experience sharp, stabbing, constant abdominal pain that physically hurts to the touch.
So not just a cramp.
Right. We aren't talking about a dull, crampy side stitch. If your abdomen is rigid and excruciating to press on, that indicates an acute medical issue, potentially an ischemic bowel, which requires a hospital.
Okay, what else?
Stop if you go to the bathroom and you have dark tea-colored or cola-colored urine.
Wait, isn't that just bad dehydration?
No, that is not just dehydration. That is rhabdomyolysis. It is a severe cascading breakdown of your skeletal muscle tissue that floods the bloodstream with toxic proteins called myoglobin. Those proteins clog the kidneys and can cause acute, irreversible renal failure.
So if your pee looks like Coca-Cola, you are done.
You are absolutely done. And finally, stop immediately if your vomit looks granular, like dark coffee grounds, or if your stool is black and tarry.
Why is that bad?
That indicates active gastrointestinal bleeding. The ischemic damage and the mechanical trauma of bouncing for 60 miles have literally torn the lining of your stomach or intestines, and you are bleeding internally.
Okay, so to recap the nightmare scenarios, if I'm deeply confused and stumbling, if my stomach is rigid with sharp pain, If my urine looks like dark tea, or if I'm bleeding internally, my race is over. I need a medic immediately.
Correct. No arguing, just stop.
But what if I do the triage and none of those are present? My mind is clear, my pee is pale yellow, my stomach isn't sharp to the touch. I'm just incredibly nauseous and throwing up my gels.
If that is the case, you are dealing with manageable nausea. It's an isolated systemic rebellion.
Okay, so what do?
You throw up, you might have some general crampy pain that accompanies the vomiting, or a mild throbbing headache from the exertion. But your vitals are intact. If that is the reality, the action plan in the ultra community is simple, if a bit grim: puke and rally.
Puke and rally, a classic strategy. But how exactly do we rally? We are empty, our stomach is traumatized. What are the top 5 things ultra runners can eat or do to reset the gut in that exact moment so they can keep moving?
We need to outline a step-by-step plan for dealing with nausea while racing. The first step to resetting a gut is a fascinating clinical trick that requires almost zero effort. Smell an isopropyl alcohol wipe.
Wait, like the tiny little prep pads nurses use to clean your arm before they give you a vaccine?
Exactly. Studies conducted in hospital emergency rooms and post-operative recovery wards have proven that olfactory stimulation from isopropyl alcohol can rapidly, almost instantly, relieve severe nausea.
Really? How does the smell fix the stomach?
The strong, sharp scent interrupts the nausea signals traveling along the vagus nerve to the brain's vomiting center. It is a neurological override. Many elite runners carry a few of these tiny wipes in their race vests just for this reason. You tear it open, take 3 deep sniffs, and the nausea often dissipates.
That is an incredible biological hack.
Yeah.
What is step 2 to reset the stomach?
Utilize ginger-based chews or lozenges. Ginger isn't an old wives' tale. It is a scientifically validated, potent, natural antiemetic.
Right?
It contains compounds called gingerols that directly soothe the inflamed gastric lining and help accelerate gastric emptying, encouraging whatever is stuck in the stomach to move into the intestines.
Nice, natural and effective. Step 3.
Peppermint oil capsules. Specifically, enteric-coated capsules, so they survive the stomach acid and open in the intestines.
What does the peppermint do?
Peppermint oil acts as a powerful antispasmodic. The menthol physically relaxes the smooth muscles of the intestinal tract. If your gut is cramped up and violently spasming from the stress, peppermint oil calms those spasms, significantly reducing the deep bloating and cramping pain.
Okay, let's talk about fluids. Because if you just threw up, you are obviously losing liquid. Do you immediately start chugging more of your sports drink to replace the calories?
Absolutely not, and that leads to step 4. Take very small micro sips of plain water.
Why plain water?
If you have a sloshy, upset stomach and you just vomited, it means your gut is overloaded and highly irritated by concentrated sugary gels. If you drink more sports drink, you were just dumping more fuel on the fire. You need to dilute the toxic, overly concentrated gut contents with plain water to lower the osmolality and help it finally empty into the small intestine.
So plain water to wash out the pipes. And the 5th step to reset the gut.
Cooling protocols. This ties back directly to our fire and water pressure analogy for splotchnic ischemia.
Right, because if the body is overheated, it's sending all the blood to the skin to sweat.
Exactly. So to get the blood back to your stomach so it can digest food, you have to cool the skin artificially. Apply an ice bandana around your neck, put ice cubes under your hat, or sponge your arms and face with ice cold water at the aid station.
Does cooling the outside really help the inside that fast?
It does. By rapidly, aggressively cooling your skin, you trick the body into constricting those peripheral blood vessels. The body says, okay, the skin is cool, we don't need to send blood there anymore.
Wow.
It pushes that oxygen-rich blood away from the skin and back into your core, aggressively reperfusing the digestive tract so the stomach can turn back on and start working again.
That is brilliant. You cool the exterior to heal the interior. Okay, so we've implemented the reset. We sniffed the alcohol wipe. We took our peppermint. We cooled our neck with ice. The nausea has passed. We've reset the system.
Good, you're back on your feet.
But now we face a massive new problem. We still have 40 miles to run. We just threw up all our calories. And the mere thought of eating a sticky gel right now is repulsive. What do? What are the top 5 things ultra runners can do to actually feel hungry again and get calories down after suffering severe gut issues?
It is a daunting task, but you have to get calories in or you will inevitably DNF. So the first strategy to stimulate hunger again is to simply walk or sit down and rest completely for 15 to 30 minutes.
Just stop racing. Isn't the clock ticking?
The clock is ticking, but moving at 0 miles per hour for 20 minutes is faster than laying in a medical tent for 4 hours.
That's a fair point.
When you stop running and sit, your heart rate plummets. The demand from the skeletal muscles drops to baseline. This immediately drastically reduces the splanching ischemia. Blood floods back into the gut. The system literally reboots, and as the gut gets oxygen, the natural appetite hormones begin to stabilize.
You literally unplug the machine from the wall and let it power cycle. What is the second strategy to feel hungry again?
Switch flavor profiles entirely. We talked about sweet fatigue. If you were eating sweet, syrupy gels and they made you sick, do not try to eat another sweet gel. Pivot completely to savory or umami flavors.
Ooh, like the boiled potatoes.
Yes. Grab a handful of salted nuts, chew on some beef jerky, or drink that hot salted broth. This completely bypasses the sensory-specific satiety block in the brain. The brain might violently reject a strawberry gummy, but it will eagerly welcome a salty, savory calorie source.
It's tricking the palate. What is strategy number 3?
Change textures. This is highly related to the flavor pivot. Move completely away from thick liquids and slimy sludges, which the stomach associates with the nausea. Find a solid, satisfying crunch.
Like what?
Eat a salty cracker, potato chip, or a pretzel. The physical act of mechanical chewing, the crunching sound, and the solid texture completely reset the oral sensory experience and often trigger a desire to eat more.
And what if your stomach is still making those awful loud sloshing noises when you walk, like there's a water balloon in your belly?
That leads to strategy 4. Wait out the sloshy stomach. Do not force food in. Pause your fueling and hydration entirely for about 10 to 15 minutes.
Just give it a minute to breathe.
Let gravity and the returning blood flow allow the stomach to naturally empty its current stagnant contents into the intestines. Once the sloshing stops and the stomach feels flat again, then you restart your fueling, but only with tiny micro sips and nibbles.
Okay, that makes sense. But what if none of that works? What if you are sitting there, you cool down, you have a potato chip, but your brain is just totally fried and you are falling asleep in the dirt?
Then you deploy the ultimate reset, strategy number 5, take a micro nap.
Sleep during a race.
Yes, a controlled 10 to 30 minute sleep on a cot at an aid station, or literally curled up on the side of the trail in a space blanket. In multi-day races, this is a standard operating procedure.
What does a 10-minute nap actually do?
A short period of actual sleep profoundly resets neuroendocrine inflammation. It drastically lowers your perceived exertion upon waking, and crucially, it allows the body's chaotic appetite hormones, the ghrelin, the leptin, the GLP-1, to stabilize and recalibrate.
Wow.
Athletes very often wake up from a 15-minute trail nap feeling deeply refreshed and with a sudden natural desire to eat a massive meal.
It really is exactly like troubleshooting complex electronics. Sometimes you just have to unplug the system, stop running, wait 30 seconds, rest, cool down, and let the circuits clear. And plug it back in, start fresh with plain water and a potato chip, or put it in sleep mode for 20 minutes.
It is a deliberate biomechanical troubleshooting protocol.
So let's assume we've executed this protocol flawlessly. We've reset the stomach. We are keeping real food down. We are moving forward again. But there is a massive elephant in the room that we haven't touched on yet.
The physical pain.
Yes. Even if your stomach is humming perfectly, even if your hydration is dialed in, your physical legs have still just run 60 miles over mountains. The muscle fibers are tearing, the joints are screaming. You are in immense, overwhelming, subjective physical pain.
It's unavoidable.
So let's move into the mind-gut connection and the psychology of the sport. How do mental toughness techniques help runners overcome pain and physical fatigue? How do they conquer that physical devastation?
Conquering that level of pain requires a fundamental, almost philosophical shift in how an athlete perceives the sensation of pain itself. The psychological sources we reviewed note a very clear, distinct psychological division.
What's the division?
Novice runners fear pain, while elite veteran runners actively manage it. There is a famous mantra in the ultra community: pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
I've seen that quote printed on 100 different running shirts and bumper stickers. It sounds incredibly inspiring in a motivational Instagram post, but what does that practically mean when you are alone in the woods at 3 a.m. at mile 80 and your quads feel like they're being stabbed with hot knives?
In a clinical psychological sense, it means that non-finishers, those who drop out of the race, rely on maladaptive coping strategies. When they feel the severe pain in their quads, they immediately catastrophize it.
What does that internal monologue sound like?
It becomes, This hurts terribly, therefore my body is failing, therefore I am doing permanent damage, therefore I must stop immediately to save myself. They fuse the physical sensation of pain with an emotional narrative of panic and failure.
They let the pain tell a story about their worth or their safety. How do the finishers handle it differently?
Finishers, conversely, utilize high-level mindfulness and cognitive reframing. They train their minds to view the pain as just raw, neutral data. It is a biological signal on the dashboard, nothing more. It is not a moral failing, and it is not an emergency. They use mindfulness to acknowledge the severe physical sensation without emotionally reacting to it. They might think, my quads are experiencing intense burning and fatigue. That is a normal physiological response to running 60 miles. I will acknowledge it, and I will keep moving.
So mindfulness helps them detach the emotional panic from the physical sensation. But how does that actually work biologically? Does calming down actually change the physical reality in the body?
It absolutely does. And the mechanism is tied to the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Tell me more about that.
When you panic, catastrophize, and react emotionally to pain, you trigger your sympathetic nervous system. You flood your body with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. This panic response accelerates your heart rate, forces you to breathe shallowly, and causes you to burn through your precious limited glycogen stores exponentially faster.
So panic literally wastes your fuel.
Exactly. Mindfulness allows an athlete to feel the severe, undeniable pain without triggering that systemic hormonal panic response. It spares their physiological resources, they stay calm, their heart rate stays low, and they preserve their fuel.
But this mental toughness, this Zen-like ability to meditate through the agony, it isn't just about reading philosophy books, right?
Yeah.
It's fundamentally tied back to the fuel in the gut.
Absolutely. This is the core of the gut-brain connection. The research refers to this state as the nourished mind. Mental toughness is, at its base level, biologically fueled. A well-fueled brain, flush with carbohydrates from a well-trained gut, possesses superior inhibitory control.
Inhibitory control, let's define that.
Inhibitory control is the neurological ability of the prefrontal cortex to suppress prepotent motor responses, which is a very dense academic way of saying it gives your brain the literal horsepower required to suppress the overwhelming, streaming urge to stop walking and sit down. When the brain is out of sugar, it loses the power to inhibit that urge. You quit.
So willpower is literally made of sugar.
In a very real biochemical sense, yes. This is why the sources recommend that runners implement a rigid if-then framework to manage their psychology.
How does that work?
If I feel a sudden, crushing wave of depression, despair, or an intense desire to quit, then I don't need a motivational pep talk from my crew, and I don't need to listen to an aggressive playlist. I need to eat a carbohydrate gel immediately.
That's a great framework.
They train themselves to interpret emotional and psychological breakdowns not as weaknesses of character, but as acute nutritional deficits.
That is such a powerful, liberating reframe. You aren't weak, you aren't a failure, you are just empty. Your dashboard light is on.
Exactly.
But looking deep into the psychological sources we pulled, I have to point out a fascinating and somewhat dark contradiction here about common psychological challenges.
The fine line of extreme psychology.
Yes, the exact traits that make an ultra runner so incredibly mentally tough. The ability to rigidly adhere to a massive, punishing training schedule. The ability to completely ignore extreme physical pain. The capacity to aggressively override the body's natural homeostatic signals of hunger and fatigue. Those exact traits sound phenomenologically identical to clinical psychopathology.
You have hit on the darkest and most complex aspect of the sport. The line between adaptive, celebrated mental toughness and maladaptive, destructive clinical disorder is incredibly thin in the ultra running community.
What do the numbers say?
The data from the psychological meta-analyses is sobering. A systematic review found alarmingly high prevalence rates of severe mental health issues in this specific athletic population. For instance, the risk or presence of eating disorders ranges from 32% to over 62% in some ultra-endurance cohorts.
62% for eating disorders. That is a staggering majority of the athletes.
It is deeply concerning. And furthermore, clinical exercise addiction, where the runner cannot stop training even when injured or when it destroys their personal life, affects roughly 11 to 18% of the field.
Why are those numbers so high in this specific sport?
Because the very psychological mechanisms that enable an athlete to succeed at running 100 miles, overriding the powerful primal signals to stop, controlling intake, managing pain through dissociation, are the exact same compulsive behaviors that characterize clinical eating disorders and addiction.
So the sport rewards the pathology.
Yes. The extreme celebrated demands of the sport can easily mask pre-existing psychiatric conditions under the socially acceptable guise of dedication or grit. Alternatively, the chronic energy deficit of RES itself, the starvation of the brain, can physically precipitate these disorders by permanently altering the brain's reward pathways.
It really requires a highly unique and sometimes highly vulnerable psychological profile to endure the caloric chasm.
It is a constant, perilous tightrope walk between transcendence and trauma.
That really changes how you look at the person crossing the finish line, completely exhausted but smiling. It is an incredible, almost superhuman physical achievement, but it comes with a profound, often invisible psychological shadow.
It certainly does.
Well, this has been an incredibly intense, illuminating journey. Let's gracefully recap what we've unpacked today in this deep dive.
Let's do it.
We started by staring deep into the massive caloric chasm of ultra running, identifying the insidious chronic signs of RES, like bone fractures and hormonal suppression, as well as the acute, terrifying signs like neuroglycopenia and mid-race hallucinations that tell us the body is starving.
And we explored the great biological paradox of the gut, how splanchnic ischemia shuts down our digestion and induces toxic leaky gut exactly when we need calories the most.
And we learned how to prevent that disaster by treating the gut like a trainable muscle, molding it over a rigorous 12-week protocol using dual fuel transporters. We mapped out precise race day execution, discovering that low glycemic agave, savory PB&J, and salted potatoes can save a palate destroyed by sweet fatigue.
We established a clear, life-saving triage guide for mid-race emergencies, learning how to reset an inflamed gut with everything from microsips of plain water to the olfactory hack of isopropyl alcohol wipes.
And finally, we proved that mental toughness isn't just some ethereal grit. It is tangibly built on a foundation of carbohydrates. We saw that managing pain requires a delicate, intentional balance of mindfulness, cognitive reframing, and relentless fueling.
It all connects back to the fuel.
And the true beauty of this deep dive is that whether you are applying these extreme rules to survive a grueling 100-mile race in the high mountains, or you are simply trying to optimize your morning hydration and fueling for your local weekend half marathon, respecting the biology and the limitations of the gut is the ultimate performance hack.
And if you want one final, truly mind-bending thought to take with you, consider this. We just spent all this time talking about willpower being fueled by carbohydrates, but the sources point to a radically new frontier in endurance science.
Oh, I like a new frontier. What is it?
Your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your intestines, might actually directly control your motivation to run in the first place.
Wait, hold on. The microscopic bacteria in my stomach decide if I have the motivation to go for a run.
Yes. Recent groundbreaking research into the gut-brain axis shows that specific strains of gut bacteria, particularly families like Eubacterium and Coprococcus, metabolize your food and produce byproducts known as fatty acid amides.
Okay, what do those do?
These specific molecules stimulate the sensory nerves lining your gut wall, which send a high-speed signal directly up the vagus nerve to the ventral striatum in your brain, which is your core reward and motivation center.
Oh, wow.
This signal triggers a massive release of dopamine, which physically enhances your intrinsic psychological drive to exercise.
So we always use the old cliche, you are what you eat. But the reality is far stranger. Your very willpower, your deep drive to push through the pain, your desire to lace up your shoes on a cold, dark morning.
Yeah.
It is literally being manufactured and dictated by the colonies of bacteria living in your stomach.
We are essentially just massive muscular mechs being piloted by our microbiome.
It brings a whole new literal meaning to the phrase, trust your gut. The dashboard of the human body might be incredibly complex, chaotic, and murky, and the warning lights might lie to us under extreme stress. But the intricate, profound connection between what we ingest and what we can achieve is absolute.
It really is absolute.
What an incredible perspective-shifting place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the science, keep safely testing your limits, and remember, listen to your gut because it might just be the one actually driving the car.
Wow. Thanks so much for listening. That's definitely a lot of information to take in. But remember, eating too much protein, your body kind of just flushes it out. It doesn't store it. So remember, if you eat too much protein, you're not going to gain too much weight. you're just gonna kind of filter it out, So I guess the key things, if you're getting more protein, just remember 3 to 4 hours. You need to eat about 30 grams of protein, give or take, with that. So kind of maybe a framework that I would be working with. And then, I would say closer to a pound for body weight, or even more than that. Maybe 1.2 for protein to how much you weigh. Kind of gives you, in pounds at least, a guidance. But you can always eat more, and it's not going to hurt you. But I'm not a dietitian, so you guys can always, would encourage you to get a dietitian as you're running, and that can help you as well with your journey on finishing the race. And once again, this is AI, so take it with a grain of sand. It is pretty smart, but it can get things wrong sometimes as well. So just test things out with your own body, and if it's working for you, continue it. If it's not, then maybe do something different. But I appreciate you guys listening, and I'll talk to you next episode. Next episode we'll be doing weight loss, and then we'll probably move beyond this kind of subject, and go to different things. But thanks for listening, and you guys have a great day out there. Enjoy the running.